Let's move forward with segment 6, monitoring and management. At this point in the course, we have already learned compute, storage, databases, networking, and security services as well. Now, imagine you are running hundreds of AWS resources. You have EC2 instances running, database serving users, application handles requests. The questions become, how do you even know everything is working properly? How do you know who is making changes if something wrong is occurring? How do you automate infrastructure creation? That's exactly why AWS provides monitoring and management service. In this particular section, we will learn three important services: CloudWatch, which is related to AWS services; CloudTrail, which is related to API calls and the changes made by users; and then CloudFormation, that is the infrastructure as a code. Think of them as three different roles. CloudWatch watches your environment, CloudTrail records your activity, and CloudFormation builds your infrastructure. A simple real world example could be, imagine a company office. Security cameras monitor activities, that's CloudWatch. Visitor log record who entered and exited, that's CloudTrail. Building blueprint helps construct offices repeatedly, and that's the CloudFormation. For the CLF-C02 exam, students or people like us often gets confused in CloudWatch and CloudTrail. Remember, CloudWatch monitors AWS resources. CloudTrail tracks action. This is the very important distinction. However, by end of this section, you will understand how AWS helps organization monitor, audit, and automate their cloud environment. Let's begin with CloudWatch. AWS CloudWatch. Basically, CloudWatch is AWS's monitoring and observability service. The definition says, CloudWatch monitors AWS resource and applications in real time. In simple words, CloudWatch helps answer, is my application healthy? Is my server overloaded? Are there any problem? Looking at the key points now. CloudWatch collects metrics, logs, and it also creates alarm, and it can also help trigger action when a threshold is crossed or a wrong thing is detected. Let's understand metrics first. Metrics are numerical measurements. For example, CPU utilization, memory usage, disk activity, network traffic. CloudWatch continuously collects these metrics. Now let's discuss logs. Applications generate logs. Servers generate logs. Lambda generate logs. CloudWatch logs stores and centralize these logs. And this could easily, when CloudWatch logs are stored, and it makes basically troubleshooting quite easier. Another important feature is alarms. Suppose CPU usage exceeded 80%. CloudWatch can automatically trigger an alarm. That alarm can notify administrator through SNS, which we will learn in the next segment. It can even trigger auto scaling section. Now, let's have a look at the architecture. AWS resources generates metrics and logs. CloudWatch collects them. Dashboard display information. Alarms could trigger action, and everything happens automatically. Common real world use case could be monitor EC2 performance, monitoring application health, maybe tracking Lambda execution, and also receives alert when a system fails. A common CLF-C02 question could be, which service monitor AWS resources and create alarm? The answer is direct, that is the CloudWatch for you. The memory trick is CloudWatch sees everything happening in AWS. Whenever AWS mentions monitoring, metrics, logs, and alarm, think CloudWatch. Let's move to AWS CloudTrail. CloudTrail is AWS's auditing and governance service. The definition says CloudTrail records API calls and account activity within AWS. In simple words, CloudTrail answers who did what, when did they do it, where did they do it from. So let's take a real world example. Suppose an EC2 instance was deleted yesterday, and management is very curious and angry. Who did this? They want to know who deleted it. CloudWatch cannot answer that, but we have CloudTrail for that purpose only. It stores the user identity, timestamps, IP address, and what action performed, kind of everything. Let's look at the key points. It records API activity, tracks user action, stores logs in Amazon S3, and also supports security investigation. So, coming to the flow, user performs an action. For example, launch EC2, delete S3 bucket, modify IAM policy. CloudTrail records the activity. Logs are stored in S3 bucket. Now, administrator can review them later. Let's have a quick discussion around event types. The first one is management event. Basically, it records management operation performed by AWS resources. Second one is data event, record resource level operation. Insight event, detect unusual API activity. So you can also be asked like someone performed some action and an unusual API activity has been detected. So which service we need to use for that purpose? The answer could be AWS CloudTrail. Common use cases could be compliance audit, security investigation, tracking user activity, troubleshooting changes, maybe governance reporting, and exam goal point. CloudTrail is enabled by default. Stores are logged in S3 bucket. And CloudTrail tracks API activity as discussed, and it also supports compliance requirements. You can integrate it with CloudWatch. And a common exam question around this could be, which AWS service records API calls? Your answer is simple, the CloudTrail. CloudTrail keeps a history of everything users do inside. Whenever AWS mention auditing, compliance, or API tracking, think CloudTrail. Now, let's move to AWS CloudFormation. CloudFormation is AWS's infrastructure as code service. Whenever you in exam you see which is the AWS infrastructure as code service, think AWS CloudFormation. The definition says, CloudFormation allows you to model and provision AWS resources using template. In simple words, instead of manually creating resources, you describe infrastructure in a template. AWS builds everything automatically. Let's take a real world example. Suppose you need 2 EC2 instance, 1 load balancer, 1 RDS database, some security group, and networking resources. You can manually create them one by one, or the better case could be to create a CloudFormation template and let AWS build everything automatically for you. That's the power of infrastructure as code. Looking at the key component or the key points, CloudFormation uses JSON or YAML templates. Always remember JSON or YAML template. It creates resources automatically. You just need to sit back and say that you need this and this, and AWS will do it for you. It manages dependencies, supports updates and deletion. Now, let's understand the flow. You created a template. CloudFormation reads that template, that what all user want, then it creates a stack. In a stack, AWS is provisioning resources that the user need this. So the future updates happen through the stack only. One important term for the exam is stack. A stack is simply a collection of AWS resources provisioned together. If the stack is deleted, resources can also be deleted automatically. Common use cases. Why CloudFormation is used? Infrastructure automation. Yes, it can automate infrastructure provisioning that the user is in need of this many resources of different types. Repeatable deployment. Environment recreation, maybe DR, that is disaster recovery, development and testing environment. Now the exam goal. JSON or YAML. Stack is a collection of resource, supports change set, supports drift detection, it works as infrastructure as code, and a common CLF-C02 query could be, which AWS service provision infrastructure using template? Think CloudFormation. The memory thing is template, stack, resource, manage. Whenever AWS mentions infrastructure as code, think CloudFormation. Jumping to monitoring and management summary. Let's quickly summarize the entire monitoring and management section. We learned three important AWS services. First, CloudWatch. CloudWatch monitor resources, collect metrics, logs, alarms, and also provide dashboard. Think monitoring. Second, CloudTrail. CloudTrail records action, tracks API call, which user is making what changes. If someone deleted an S3 bucket or EC2 instance, the administrator will know because CloudTrail keep records through API calls, and those calls are stored in S3. It supports auditing and compliance. Think tracking of something. Third, CloudFormation. CloudFormation automate infrastructure deployment. It uses template, creates a stack, and supports infrastructure as code. Think automation. For the exam, many questions revolve around like distinguishing these services. Remember this: CloudWatch monitor, CloudTrail audits, and CloudFormation automates. And it is also infrastructure as code. The final memory trick for the entire section is monitor with CloudWatch, audit with CloudTrail, build with CloudFormation. If you remember these three lines, you will be good to go.